like everyone's back. So Sarah.
All right. Hey everyone. Thanks for joining in. Sorry for running a little late. We had some technical difficulties. This is the Node.js Foundation Community Committee meeting for May 25th, 2017. We're going to skip a couple of the early parts of the meeting just to catch up on time. So we will skip the previous agenda from the previous meeting, and we'll just go and dive right into our current agenda. So we're going to start off with pull request number 50. We have a pull request open to make some charter changes that I made. It's mostly some pretty small stuff. It changes the participation rules to match what the TSC has. Most of the stuff is just getting it in line with the TSC. The other thing it does is it adds a new entry in our list of responsibilities, which is specifically education initiatives. This is something that I think we just forgot when we added it originally, and I think it's very much within our scope. But so to give a little context on process on this, so this is a charter change, which means if we all approve it, then we have to go to the board and get them to also approve it. And then once the board approves it, that's going to be the point when we can land the pull request. And so has everyone had a chance to take a look at these changes? Is there anyone who wants to see any other changes or has any concerns about it? Anything of that nature?
Oh, good to me.
Okay, so yeah, if there's no complaints, William, if you could go ahead and take those changes and officially present them to the board. We have officially agreed on it here in the community committee. We just need their sign off so that we can land it.
Okay, I will add it to the agenda.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so moving on from that. This is also another thing, just to kind of let you know that I filed an issue in the TSC repo. This is number 270. And this is a formal request to go ahead and move moderation responsibilities and duties and things like that from the TSC to ComCom. This is something I think most of us have talked about doing at some point in time. And so now it's a matter of basically doing all the paperwork and going through the process to get that officially transferred.
I have a question about this. Like, there was a thread discussion with Michael Rogers, and he mentioned project threads. I just wonder what the term means.
Project threats?
Yeah, like kind of that was his only concern, that you would basically move ownership, right, while the process would remain the same.
So yeah, I don't want to put my words in Michael's mouth. He wasn't able to. Sorry, go ahead, Brian. I think you had come.
So I was going to say, I heard threat, T-H-R-E-A-T, as opposed to a thread.
Oh, sorry, I'm not native. Happens to me all the time.
Well, even when we are native, they sound so similar. Yes, I mean, this is a legitimate question, and I think it's something that we will want to consider if we look at changing the way moderation is done today. The concern is that whenever people are moderating a thread, there's a certain amount of context in any given thread, and the decision to moderate or not moderate is often based on having context of the discussion. Is something derailing or not? Is something, for example, to determine something's derailing, you need to know what's being talked about. And so there's just concerns where people without the proper context would be moderating.
And I think,
go ahead.
I think I appreciate Michael's concern in that he is right that in the current context of what moderation covers, it makes sense for the TSC to have moderation, but because the community committee covers a different scope than just the GitHub repos that the TSC oversees, it makes sense for moderation to expand on that eventually, right? Like, moderation is not moderation only for, my understanding was the intention was not just for moderation to be only moderation for technical conversations overseen by the TSC. It was that we're trying to create moderation guidelines for things under the Node project. And when the TSC made the scope smaller, it makes the moderation being there a weird fit. And I guess it's not smaller, it's just very much more specific. And I think Michael, it would be interesting to hear Michael Dawson's take on this and whether this fits.
Yeah, I guess I see your point that like moderation is a bigger issue. I was just thinking as you were talking, like, I don't know if some ideas of like having moderators from those, designated from those projects helps as part of the model, or, like I could see the sort of overall ownership and moderation fitting in with the community committee, because you're going to want to moderate, it possibly applies to conferences, to whatever other channels there are. But if you then somehow pull in the people who come from those projects into the moderation process, maybe it addresses some of the other issues of context and so forth.
Absolutely, because you need people, you can't really moderate if people don't listen to the moderators, right? So they're gonna first, and I know people will generally follow rules when the rules are in place. But when folks who are working together in those repos, they're familiar with one another, and they are, they have representation and moderation, then they feel more supported, from the outside. But you also have people within that group saying like, all right, we got to moderate you. And that, I think it's way more powerful when those people have that. You have the buy-in. Right. It doesn't make any sense for us to make moderation in isolation.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Like the people in the other projects, may be perfectly happy to jump in and help moderate, but may not be as interested in figuring out the ins and outs. And
yep.
And if they are, they can come and participate, in the discussions over here.
Yep, and that's actually exactly what my intention is by bringing moderation to ComCom, it's really moving from the TSC to ComCom, or the things that the TSC is responsible for. Because if we look at day-to-day moderation the way it's done today, it's very rarely the TSC people who actually do it. And, it's people who are involved in the threads and have contacts. And I very much want to continue in that sphere, because I think that's actually worked pretty well for most of the moderation cases that come up. And so really ComCom's role is just more overseeing it. I'm hearing some echo in someone's mic. All right. Okay. I think that was yours, Michael. But yeah. So like the idea is that we're really just overseeing the process. We can like kind of help craft policies. We're the ones who will solicit input and just like oversee the process of getting policies like passed and implemented. But not that we actually want to do it. I mean, we're a fairly small community. We don't have the time enough and just resources to do it. So yeah, I very much want to continue where we are. It's just how we craft the policies around it will change a little bit.
And that might also address some of the conversation I can see in the issue about org owners, right? Because it may mean that, if you're pulling the people from the existing projects, you don't need new people with org ownership to make it happen.
I think it does.
I didn't say anything.
Could you we're getting feedback through your mic.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, and definitely any like policy change that we propose, we definitely would want to, pull in the CTC, pull in the TSC, and everyone else in the project and get feedback on it. And just like today, like anytime I have a TSC issue come up, we usually get a lot of feedback from people not on the TSC as well, and we want that feedback. It'll be the same thing.
Yeah, I think the point here that's probably better to make, and again, like I think it would be interesting to hear that feedback from the TSC as a group, is that when moderation exists under ComCom, it's input by everyone, right? Because ComCom includes the TSC in terms of representation. Whereas generally speaking, the TSC is a very specific group of people from the TSC. So it's just a larger set of voices getting input and participating in that moderation section.
Yep, absolutely. And also, I think this will, in a way, free up the TSC to focus on more technical matters. That's one of the problems we've had on the TSC recently, is there's this sort of odd split of like things we have to do and the skill sets going with them. So moderation is one of them. There's also some administration stuff as well. We've also been talking about splitting out, and I view this as very much within that vein. So, this is very much to help the TSC as well. All right, any other thoughts before we move on to the next issue? Let's look at, this is issue number 45 on the Common repo. This is expanding the Node.js collection reviewers. So we have someone from the Node, Sarah. Would you like to give some background on this?
Sure. We worked with Tierney and Ross Kublinski at, earlier in the year to develop a sort of an entire program around turning our Node Medium blog into a Node collection, which means turning it into a publication using Medium, which would allow for outside contribution of content from the community. It allows you to do a lot more commenting and sharing and create more of a viral network effect with the content, hopefully. So we've launched this publication through Medium in February and devised sort of a whole set of guidelines on what type of content we would be looking for and what type of review process we would have and the review board. And it's been doing fairly well. It's had some good traction. I think the review process, though, the review board needs to be expanded, because one thing, it's from the Node.js Foundation side, myself or Zibby, actually, and Zibby Keaton takes a large role in this, provide an editorial review and sort of a proofreading and grammar review. But we really rely on the technical experts in the community to also provide that technical review and ensure that the content is accurate, that it's credible content, that it's something we'd want to publish. And that's where there's been, we haven't had as sort of even participation there. So we'd like to make it a bigger review board. And we'd also like to suggest a change to our process, which our process is linked to on GitHub. We'd like to recommend that there needs to be at least, we were going to say at least one, maybe we want to say at least 2 technical reviewers that would initial a submission to ensure that, we would do the copy edit side, and that there would also be proof or a paper trail, through the initialing, that some technical experts also did a review. That was going to be our suggestion. I guess and we have what's also documented in our process guideline is how quickly we try to turn around and give feedback to someone, letting them know, is your submission going to be accepted, or do we need you to do X, Y, and Z? So the one thing that has been working is we've gotten a lot of content populated through the publication, but we would like to engage more technical experts without hopefully slowing down the review cycles, and still being able to get a really good flow of content going. So does anyone have questions, or does that, and please, I know there's been a GitHub discussion too, where people chimed in with other ideas and maybe even thoughts, and happy to hear that as well.
Well, I would say too, it's important to note that people who are doing this sort of thing, and someone who commits to being able to do this technical reviewing, this is something that you can wear, right? You can say you are a technical reviewer for the Node collection. And I think that that's really important. I don't think people really, I don't know if people really understood, that's valuable to some people. So if we can find folks who are looking to expand this as a talent of theirs or something that they'd like to put on their resume, that's absolutely something they can do, and they would be doing as a fairly regular commitment. I was trying to think from a work perspective, Sarah, can you recall how many submissions we tend to get in a month?
I think we're getting, when Zibby was gone, for example, the last vacation she took, we're getting 3 or 4 a week. Some weeks are a little more active, some weeks slow down, but it's a pretty steady, at least 2 to 3 are coming in. It's been a pretty good response, which has been great.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, as the collection grows, that would likely, the goal of that would be to increase that volume and to continue kind of growing it as a community resource for Node.js content. And so, it's about 15 a month, I think, at this point. And, some of those are articles that, doesn't really, it's not a kind of coherent article, you got to say no to that. It would be too much work on the review side, either technically or as just a normal kind of editing process, to go flesh that out. Like you'd be writing the article a lot yourself or as a review process. But there is a lot of good and strong technical content that does come through and does need review. And so I think the technical side at this point would probably be 10 articles a month in review, and split between 5 people that are able to kind of work on that review process. That's an article or 2 a month ideally. So
are these submissions posted publicly during the review process, or is it something that you keep internally?
We've been using a Google Doc review process.
Yeah, so
it's private, it's not public, and it's been Google Docs.
Yeah. On the rare occasion we've had, oh, sorry, Sarah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say on the rare occasion we've had the hiccup where someone has transferred over an article that had already been published, and then edits were accidentally published as part of that, but that is not a common practice. And we actually have, as Sarah said, a process and documented guidelines that are already in place. There's, I believe the first Medium post that we had out for the Node collection was actually talking about this.
Yeah.
But that's also what Sarah was saying was we're up for refining those processes. Now that we've been going a little ways, we recognize that there are some things that could change about that too. But we do prefer that the first submission is in private for the sake of the author, as well as being kind in the editing process.
Yeah.
And to give a little bit of context, like a kind of overhead view of how the process is now, you submit your article to medium@nodejs.com, or is it editors? I'm pretty sure it's medium@nodejs.com.
Yeah.
And then that gets forwarded to a group of people. I think there's 8 or 9, and those people are the ones who have been included in the review. And so that process is documented in the evangelism working group repo as an issue. And there's also a doc that I don't know where that doc lives, like where the link for that is. But the doc has been moved over to the evangelism repo as well. And that, in addition to the original article, have been, I linked to those in the issue that the community committee repo issue that we're talking about now. They're at the bottom there. So.
Okay, so at this point, it sounds like the big thing you need is the reviewers themselves. Like we need to find a way to get a collection of reviewers together in a way to sort of engage with them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So my first thought, and I really want to hear what everyone else thinks, is most of the technical people know they work on GitHub. So this is something where we should probably have a GitHub team.
A GitHub what?
A GitHub team, which is something that we can certainly do. The idea from a permissions model, a GitHub team is just a named group of people, and you can assign permissions based on. But another thing you can do, where I think it'd be helpful here, is you can mention a team in GitHub. So you can go like, hey, @Node.js/collaborators, that's one team. For example, it'll send a notification to every single collaborator. We could create one that's specifically for people who have agreed to help out. And this way, there's a repo around it. There's like a place to organize, and also, like I said, a place to sort of tag people. It's like when reviews are coming out, you could open an issue saying, "Hey, we have 5 submissions. Who's interested in helping out?" Try it that way. I had off the top of my head. What does everyone else think?
Tierney, the question I have for you is the evangelism working group, do they have enough other noise happening that this makes sense to split off into a separate repo?
I think, yes, I agree. I think that's splitting is a good idea, yeah.
Cool.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's one way to communicate with the group once, I guess, but we I guess before that, how do we actually identify more reviewers or get more reviewers to either volunteer, or we sort of go out to people individually and solicit participation?
Yeah, I would say, go ahead, Brian.
Probably going to say the same thing. I think that's where having like a repo would help. There's sort of a landing page that people can see, and we can actually start by, at mentioning, just Node.js/collaborators or CTC and TSC. We can mention it in their meetings as well. Be like, hey, we're just looking for people who are interested in helping out. So stop by if you're interested.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that I think that to expand on, I think GitHub is but one place that people socialize, and that this kind of brings up the larger outreach energy that we could have. But we could lean on everyone's network within the community committee to share this as well and offer that. Either as reaching out to individuals and saying, hey, I think you'd be really good for this if you have the time and space to do it, because that's generally more effective than doing a mass blast on Twitter. But you never know. We might be able to reach someone who is really capable of doing this and just didn't think there's an opportunity yet.
I'd also suggest you were pitching that, hey, this is something people can point to and say, hey, look, I'm doing this, so it kind of adds to your resume or whatever. It might be good to like figure out where you're gonna, can you list those people as reviewers on the GitHub README page or whatever, somewhere where they could sort of point back to make it, support that side of things as well.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that's a very good idea. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe even throw it like at the end of articles or on the Medium profile or something. Thanks to these people for reviewing.
Yeah, I think that's another good idea. Like, because it's going to be a fair amount of work, so anything we can do to sort of, show that these people visibly contributed would be a good thing.
I think we could put there's sort of like a description of that sort of just generically, or not generically, but specifically, rather describes what our publication is about, and I think we could list them there. I don't know how authors would actually feel if editors were always listed against their articles one by one, to be honest, but
the way that I see it done, Sarah, is that instead of as the byline, like as an author, which in Medium is a very distinct place, they'll add it. People will add editors or people who helped contribute to their article just as a thanks at the bottom.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would have to ask.
Yeah.
And I mean, even, having that as a part of the process of, okay, submitting your article and, we'd like to add these things. That's part of the kind of give and take of this. I think that might be another option.
Yeah, I think if you state it up front, that should help. It's like, this is the way we do business. And so as you submit, you understand that's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, I think the goal, though, also is to do a technical edit, a review, and there won't always have to be a heavy edit. I mean,
right.
So, I don't think the goal is to do extensive, hopefully not, in many cases, edits and cycles and just spend a lot of time on that, Yeah.
Cool.
Okay,
Yeah, I think it might be good to set those expectations for the editors as well. It's sort of like, my first guess is what we want is somebody to read through and make sure that, it's technically accurate enough, not rewrite it or anything like that. So that would be good context to sort of document.
That's why I think it actually, there's the goal to maybe scale it. I'd rather try to get, 3 to 4, maybe 5 consistent editors that sort of participate. I understand if they might want to pass the baton after doing it for a certain time period, but I think it's easier to maintain sort of the process and the quality if the editorial group is a little tighter.
Yep. I agree.
Okay, so to kind of summarize the things we talked about so far, it sounds to me like there are 2 key action items that we have from this. One is to work on really defining the process for editing and like how people get attributed as editors and things like that, what's expected of editors and what that process is like. And I'd imagine it's probably just documenting things you've already figured out mostly.
Yeah, we have a lot of it already documented, but I'll make a few tweaks based on this discussion, yeah.
And then the other thing is to start recruiting and finding people specifically. So I think we can definitely reuse the issue we have. Do we want to go and start? We can create a team and a repo now for that. We could also continue to discuss it and get more feedback before we do that. Do you all have a preference?
I think being proactive and going and creating the team and repo would be, I don't see a downside to that necessarily.
Okay.
And do people like the idea, no one commented really negative or positive, but I don't want to assume, of it having at least 1 or 2 technical reviewers for each article?
No, I don't think that's a bad thing. I agree. Yeah.
I think, but
yeah, and I think the collaborative base will definitely be behind that. Everyone wants to make sure that the stuff being written about Node is accurate.
Right.
Yep.
Some people have very strong opinions on that.
Yeah.
Even. So yeah, I don't think interest will be a problem. It's just actually finding the specific individuals, getting them onboarded, and all that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
It's classic +1. We need the +1 to ship.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that I can take that as an action item afterwards to go ahead and create that repo, and I'll add both of you as admins for that repo.
Okay. And I can send you a list of the people who were already volunteering.
Oh,
you can add them.
That would be great. And if I can just get their GitHub handles, the specific thing I need. And then that way we can start mentioning people, and you can start adding in documents there that describe like the process and all of that.
Great. Thank you.
Cool. All right, anything else on that before we move on? Sarah, for joining in and helping to really fill out the details on that. That was really helpful.
Oh, great. Thank you, guys. I'm going to jump off as it's kind of getting into dinner time, and I have a STEM night tonight with my kids. So
no problem.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, next up is issue number 38, adding folks as members. We've had some discussion around this. I think it's been pretty good. We still don't have actual artifacts from that, though. Ultimately, what we really want to get out of this is a contributing guide, like a contributing.md file. So looking at this, do we want to just continue discussing on GitHub, or do we feel like there's a fairly solid kind of idea and we know where to move forward on this? I mean, I certainly have my opinions on this. Like, I do think this is something that we really should get figured out, because we are getting people who come in who want to contribute, and right now it's just kind of hand wavy of like, yeah, come help out, but then we don't actually really help people to understand what that means, what the purpose of membership is, where it's useful, and why you might want to become one as well.
I agree it's an important topic. I just don't have much to contribute right now.
Brian, how about just kind of listing out what you have gathered so far on like positive thoughts of where we think we're going?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely am, in my head, I'm modeling ComCom after the TSC, and that we are more of like an administrative overhead body. We won't be doing a lot of work ourselves, like as a governing body, even if the individuals on, who our members will be. And instead, what we really want to do is start spinning up like teams and working groups under us to really focus on solving specific problems. Now, we're not there yet. We hope to bring education under, but that will probably be the first. So the moderation work coming in, when that happens, will happen somewhere. And so I think and I don't really have a good answer for this yet, is how do we broach this first? Like where do we want to get started? I feel like there's a bit of a chicken and egg here. Do you want to start spinning up teams with the ComCom the way it is and really start pushing the teams to do work? Or do we want to start taking on some of this work ourselves and then spinning off teams as we see fit, and just kind of keep small for the time being. And I feel like answering that question will help us determine what our membership policies are as well.
Yeah, I think we want to start getting some teams going. We just had a discussion about starting a team up, right? Because otherwise what we'll have is people that will attend meetings and they'll sit there for a long time off of their specific interest, talking about other things. And so, yeah, I'd rather have the teams where they're going to talk about their exact interest and keep people more engaged, and not like give an environment where they want to skip a meeting because it's not the stuff they want to be talking about at that meeting.
Right, and I think this is just, so what we're talking about here is really just doing like this contributing MD file, which points people in the direction so that you can say, you just go here, we've got these teams, these are how you get started with these teams, like hop on in, right? Or are you talking about like defining member more?
I think it's a bit of both,
okay.
Sort of. I think we have a good definition of what a member is, but we haven't really defined, or we determined what it is in a like sort of legal charter perspective. But we haven't defined how we add members to ComCom. And I think part of that comes from, we don't have a clear vision yet, in my opinion, what exactly like the day-to-day responsibilities of ComCom are, even if we know what the high-level responsibilities are. And I at least feel like, defining this member policy and how we add members is probably going to be influenced by the answers to these other questions.
Well, I thought right now we have to add members, I thought we fixed last meeting. Or you're saying like just giving a more specific definition to what is a member, what does it mean to be a member of community committee?
I think it's a bit of both. So like if someone wants to become a member, like how do they signify that interest? Specifically, we don't have if you want to become a member, click this link, fill this thing out. The process looks like this. You will receive your answer, yes or no, this way. Like the mechanics of adding a member, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Oh, I thought we did that last time where it was the discussion. I thought that it's maybe that we just need to finish going through that action, was that someone just files an issue saying they want to be a member, and so they get added as an observer, and then from there they go through the time period of participating and then get added as a member if they've met the requirements.
Oh, that's right, we did. Okay, I remember that.
Yeah, sorry, that's why there's things we have to-dos that may need to be carried on that were missed from prior notes. And that's my fault. But yeah, so I thought that we had established that. I do like the idea of just like going ahead in the contributing MD and being like a little more colloquial about, hey, like we're gonna have these teams, we're gonna have the node collection team, we're gonna have the, education team, we're gonna have these cool things. So, and they're looking for help, and then it's the responsibility of those teams, right, to also say like, here's some help, here's things that we need, or just go look at the issues list. We've got labels for things we need help with.
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Okay.
I like that a lot.
So I tried chiming in earlier, but my Hangouts crashed really weird. I have had 3 people independently come ask me, how can I start doing this? And I pointed them to the repo, and as I'm doing that, I realized I don't really know what the next step. Like I tell that, you can start getting involved, you can start commenting on issues, you can start opening issues with your ideas, joining, things like that, joining in. There's no solid path that I can really go point someone to say, here's something you can go do, kind of like your first PR type thing, that level of interaction. So I'm just curious if that's something that maybe we could go define, like is some kind of first step for people to go do. And the community committee, like we were saying, is the kind of governing body of these teams. Maybe having a team or teams, directing them to a team or teams would be the better option for that. But I'd like to know if we can kind of tease that out, if I should create an issue or something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't seem to recall that we have an issue tracking this currently.
No, we don't. No, I mean, should I go create one?
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's basically what I just wrote, was like a to-do of that.
Got it.
Yeah, we need to do this. This is, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, let's do that as a next step. So I'm going to recommend, if everyone else is okay with this, that we take off the CC agenda label for membership for now. So I think we need to flesh this other stuff out a bit first. At least that's what I feel about that. Does everyone else agree? Or does anyone want to like flip that around and kind of do it the other way?
And I think it's just work that needs to be done as opposed to a decision that needs to be discussed.
Yep, I agree as well.
Yep.
Okay,
Cool.
So I'll go and take CC agenda off of that issue. And then Tierney, if you can go and file an issue to create a contributing guide. And yeah, we'll work on that. And I don't have any expectations we'll get that done quickly, just because I think we're still figuring out what it is we do, and thus how people can contribute.
Maybe that's a good place to direct people to contribute.
Yeah. Well, we do. Well, okay. Now I think about it, we do have the issue that William filed that is claim some scope. I can't remember the exact wording of it, but that one dovetails into this discussion at least. So we should make sure to kind of loop that issue into it. Other thoughts, comments on this issue before we move to the last one?
I think we have 2 more issues.
Okay, let me take a look. We discussed Node.js TSC number 270, moving moderation. Tweaks number 50, we discussed reviewers 45. We just discussed 38, adding folks as members. Yeah, so I only count moderation shortage number 33 is the last item.
We didn't put up Rachel's issue that she asked for to be added yesterday about Node together.
Yeah.
Oh, crap, do we not?
That's issue 63.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and go and just discuss that now before I forget. And sorry about that, I missed that, and yeah, we should have labeled that. Can I give some background on this?
Sure. So I was talking to Tracy about this because I guess back in the fall, we were trying to think of ways for Node Together to exist so that we're able to, partner with conferences and other places that are running events and want to be able to keep on running things for the community. But the way to fund that would be either to create an individual entity, which I just learned how to write checks 2 years ago. Nobody wants me to fill out paperwork. So that was one option. And the other option was explore getting absorbed into the Node Foundation so that we're able then to take on donations directly from sponsorships and funding that way. And then we were also talking this week about how it might be beneficial to have Node Together, since it is education and evangelism and a bunch of other outreach things kind of into one, moving the repository under the jurisdiction of ComCom so that we're able to tightly stay to the mission of wanting to provide education to newcomers, specifically underrepresented minorities, while also being friendly and welcoming to anyone that wants to help out and that kind of stuff. Tracy might be able to give better coherent insight than I have, because I think that she was doing a bunch of research into this kind of stuff before I was in charge of the org.
Yeah. So we had familiarized the idea of Node Together being a part of the foundation. And Ashley and I had talked about that last year after Node Together had partnered with Node Live for a pretty cool season of events. And the board, I know, like individual board members that I've talked to, really love what Node Together stands for. And so we had looked at the idea of bringing it into the project because it complements, it does not conflict with Code and Learn. They're very different reaches, but they're both really good programs. So when Rachel and I were talking about this, it almost seemed a little silly how simple it can be by just moving over the repo into the Node repo. And the biggest thing here, because there's no IP, because there's no legal entity, there's very little work to be done here to move that over other than making sure that the board is cool with it, right? Because if Node Together is part of the org, it's likely that we'll request allocation from the foundation for events to be able to happen like we did with Code and Learn this year. So, we want to make sure that people don't feel like we're taking up the space, from other organizations who are doing cool work. But we do think that Node Together kind of matches what, the mission of the foundation is. So anybody have questions, concerns? Because we'll have plenty of questions we'll have to answer to the board as well.
Just one little comment, and I mentioned this in the issue as well. I was looking at the charter, just kind of double checking some stuff. There's not a place for education initiatives in there, or I didn't feel like there's anything that even if we stretched it would fit. So I did include, the change in the charter for it, and this is totally procedural, I know.
I think that it was more or less the missions fit, and I mean, I don't know if you wanted to adapt the charter to follow with some kind of educational outreach in terms of making sure that principles of people that are trying to work with the foundation match the same kind of things that we're trying to set with diversity and inclusivity. That's where I kind of saw the fit, but I don't know.
And Brian, this is where I had a conversation this morning about that, right? Education versus education initiative, right? And I think what we had talked about earlier in the session was adding education to the charter as one of the scopes. Not education initiatives, but education. Was that correct?
I don't remember having this conversation, I have to confess.
No, not us having this conversation today. Sorry, I'm talking about when we're talking about the changes to the charter earlier. Was that not one of the changes? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. So that's so I'm talking about two different conversations. My apologies. A conversation I had earlier today in trying to check to see what this education versus education initiatives vocabulary, and that's where it was suggested to me that we needed to ask the board because otherwise we would not need to ask permission to bring in Node Together into the repo. So my recommendation, and through the conversation I had with Mark, the executive director, was that we should bring it to the board just for them feeling comfortable because there is that blurred line of education and education initiatives.
Yeah, I think
as a conversation, not even as it needs to be added to the charter type thing. So.
Yeah, well, I do want to add something to the charter around this. We could definitely wordsmith on what the details should be, though. I don't have a strong opinion myself.
So what are you saying? Add education initiatives on top of education?
Well, I didn't even see education in there.
Oh.
In any form or fashion, actually. There was, and as far as the inclusivity aspect, this is another area where we may want to consider tweaking the charter a bit. Because the only time we really explicitly refer to it as one of our responsibilities is overseeing the inclusivity working group.
Oh, yeah.
I feel narrows the scope a little bit. So it's sort of, once again, this is procedural legalese. This is not, the reality of where we're actually working. But it implies, from a charter legal perspective that if it's not done inside the inclusivity working group, then it actually doesn't count as one of our responsibilities.
So the reason that inclusivity is not called as a scope, and that I would probably recommend we do not then call out education specifically, is that we were very careful with that charter wording in terms of scope. And it was actually, that was the part that the board paid very close attention to, because they wanted it very specific, but as ambiguous as possible. So inclusivity was actually one of the items on there in an early form of the draft. And they told us that it wasn't necessary to say it that specifically. So I don't think that we have to have that written into the charter in that way in order for it to make sense for it to be scoped to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
If the board's fine, if that's the way they interpret it, then that makes our lives easier.
But yeah, anytime I think that we're adding these types of projects that are coming out from the outside in is definitely something that we want to fly by them. But yeah, otherwise I don't think that charter-wise that should be a problem.
All right, so next steps on this, it sounds like we need to ask the board, just kind of get their sign off on this. And then once that's done, is that just simply a matter of transferring ownership of that repository to the Node Foundation, and then we PR it to our README? Am I missing anything in that? Is there anything else we also need to discuss around this move?
There's the website for it. I don't know if that'll need any special consideration. I worked on it a while ago. Is it a GitHub Pages site, Tracy? Do you know, or is it hosted on?
Yeah, it's a GitHub Pages site.
Yep.
Okay.
The only other thing I know that in terms of repos coming, outside repos coming in for, technical ones, has been the TSC has asked for governance to be added. I don't know if it's already there, but basically something that says, this is what the governance that applies to this repo is as part of the move.
Mm-hmm. So is that a separate writing, or is that simply saying, like, the TSC will govern this as part of, or the ComCom will govern this as part of this request to move it into the project?
Most of the other ones, it's been like, they're basically been duplicates of the template ones that are used for the, the CTC and the TSC, which basically says, it's open governance, there's members, if that applies. If this is just going to be handled as part of the rest of the ComCom activities, maybe just a reference that says, this project is governed by the governance that's defined over here would make sense.
Okay.
Yeah, that does raise an interesting question, actually. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Is this going to be a working group or a team? I think we probably want to start as a team, but may consider converting to a working group at some later point in time, which does involve a lot more of this kind of governance structure.
Yeah, I think that would be up to the Node Together team.
Yeah,
I think it's easier to come in as a team.
Another thing to consider is there is the Node Together Slack that does have moderation and stuff inside of it, and it's also a kind of foundational part of how the Node Together groups and people that participate are able to connect after the event. That's something that we're also going to have to consider.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That actually we might need to be a working group for that thing, because when you're a working group, that's how you can get granted autonomy to moderate things as you see fit. Technically, teams aren't supposed to do that, really. I don't. We'll think on this.
I don't know. I don't think we have rules, or I don't think our working group. Maybe you're thinking the TSC stuff, or maybe that's more of a cultural thing. But I mean, I can't see the. I know for a fact that the Node Together, the guidelines for code of conduct are stricter, much stricter than nodes. So, I mean, that still follows the Node Code of Conduct guidelines, right? Which it has to at least be as meet the same line in the sand as the Node code of conduct, but it is okay to have a further. But I don't think we define working groups for the ComCom to that degree that they wouldn't be able to, or teams that they like would not be able to have their own.
I think the main difference has been that like teams have normally just been, they're groups of people, they do whatever, and but ultimately they don't own the resources or repos, and so the the CTC or whatever group would have the final decision making. Whereas work groups, it's like formally said, we've delegated this responsibility to you guys, so you can define your own code of conduct, so you can define your own processes. I think in the day-to-day working, there really hasn't been much difference. It's just really been in that formalization of handing off the responsibility.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good information for Rachel to consider and talk to the other organizers about.
Sorry, I'm just like nodding so I don't have to unmute myself.
It's just sort of like, will you want a group of people other than, say, the community committee to be the ones who would vote on, I don't know, not that happens very often, but if you had to vote on something, would you want it to be a smaller group that's just related to that? Or, are you okay with it defaulting back to the community committee as the members?
I mean, I would prefer that it default to the community committee.
Right, in which case you just, you wouldn't want to charter a separate group. You'd want to leave it just as a team that's working, and that's the way I think the default would be.
Oh.
All right, so at this point we are about 7 minutes over. Sorry, everyone. I think it's okay since we got started late. Is there anything else you want to talk about with this? I'm also going to recommend that we just table issue number 33, moderation shortage, and we can talk about it at the next meeting. Is everyone okay with that?
I'm fine with that.
Yep.
Okay, all right, we'll leave CC agenda label on that then, so we'll make sure to pick it up next time. All right, any final comments?
Oh, do we have Q&A? Sorry, should we? Yeah.
Right, sorry, I have another email with that. Yeah, has anyone asked any questions on YouTube?
I don't see any so far.
Okay, people may have left because we didn't start early. Once again, sorry about that, everyone. But yeah, if you have any questions, you can always file an issue on GitHub and we can answer them there. All right, and thanks everyone for joining in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
All right, see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.